You found your way to Whispers of Crimes, a quiet corner where the shadows of the past are gently told. Here, we speak of real crimes and mysteries, not to shock or scare, but to wonder, to reflect, and maybe to help you fall asleep. So close your eyes, let your thoughts slow down, and come with me into tonight's case. In the heart of British Columbia, on a filthy pig farm just outside Vancouver, a quiet man was hiding the darkest secret in Canadian history. For years, women from the downtown east side vanished one after another. Police said they were runaways, addicts, forgotten, but families knew something was wrong. They were right. Behind the rusted gates of the Pickton farm, buried beneath mud, bone, and lies, was a horror no one imagined. A killer who used pigs to destroy evidence. A man who almost got away with 50 murders and nearly did. This isn't just a story about a serial killer. It's about a system that looked the other way until it was too late. Please be advised, this episode contains content that may be upsetting to some listener. Listener discretion is strongly advised. Chapter 1. A Farm Shrouded in Secrets. Robert William Pickton was born on October 24th, 1949, in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia, into a family that operated a pig farm. The Picktons were a reclusive, odd family. Robert, known as Willie, was quiet and socially awkward. He struggled in school and dropped out in 9th grade. Many who knew him growing up remembered him as unkempt and shy, a loner who didn't quite fit in. He spent most of his youth working on the farm with his siblings, particularly his brother David, who was more extroverted and aggressive. The Pickton farm, a 14-acre property, became both their home and their business. It was a place where they raised and slaughtered pigs and where outsiders rarely ventured unless they had a reason. Over time, the Pickton brothers inherited full control of the property and began using parts of it for more than just agriculture. In the mid-1990s, they registered a nonprofit organization called the Piggy Palace Good Times Society, supposedly to host community events. But what really took place on the farm were unauthorized raves and wild parties that attracted drug users, sex workers, and biker gangs. This remote, muddy farm, full of abandoned cars, tools, and animal pens, would ultimately become the epicenter of one of the most horrific serial killer cases in Canadian history. And for nearly 2 decades, no one knew what was happening behind its decaying walls. Chapter 2. Vancouver's Vanishing Women. Between the early 1980s and the early 2000s, women began disappearing from Vancouver's downtown east side with disturbing frequency. This area of the city, known for its high rates of poverty, drug use, and sex work, became the hunting ground for someone preying on society's most vulnerable. From 1983 to 2002, more than 60 women vanished without a trace. Most of the missing were Indigenous or marginalized women. Many had histories of addiction or had turned to sex work to survive. For years, families reported their loved ones missing, only to be told by police that they had probably run away, moved to another city, or were simply avoiding contact. The investigations were sporadic, and many reports were not taken seriously. It wasn't until 1998 that the Vancouver Police and RCMP formally launched a joint task force to investigate the disappearances. Despite public outcry, candlelight vigils, and protests from families, the progress was slow. The lack of bodies, evidence, or witnesses made the cases difficult, but critics argued that the root of the inaction was institutional indifference. Authorities failed to acknowledge a clear pattern or link between the disappearances. No major alerts were issued. No major search efforts were coordinated. For years, the public remained largely unaware of how many women were vanishing. But those who lived and worked in the downtown east side had long feared the worst, that a serial killer was among them. Chapter 3. Robert Pickton's Hidden World. Despite his quiet demeanor, Robert Pickton had long existed in the background of the downtown east side. He frequently drove into the city to pick up women, offering them money, drugs, or shelter in exchange for sex or companionship. He was known to be odd, sometimes generous, but also controlling. Some women who returned from the Pickton farm described disturbing behavior. Others were never seen again. Pickton's reputation within certain circles was unsettling. He reportedly bragged about killing women to acquaintances and spoke openly about how easy it would be to dispose of a body on a pig farm. "Pigs will eat nearly anything," he said. Many dismissed these comments as dark humor, but as later events would show, they were literal confessions. Meanwhile, his farm remained a place of decay and chaos. Old trailers were strewn across the land, many serving as makeshift living spaces. One trailer was home to Pickton himself, where investigators would eventually find clothing, tools, and containers linked to multiple victims. Another structure on the property served as the location for piggy palace events, unregulated, rowdy, and dangerous affairs where law enforcement rarely intervened. The property became a magnet for society's forgotten, those desperate for a place to party, escape, or earn money. And Robert Pickton, quiet and seemingly non-threatening, used it to his full advantage. Chapter 4. The Missed Opportunity of 1997. In March 1997, a woman narrowly escaped Robert Pickton's farm with her life. She had gone with him under the assumption that she would be paid for sex, but once there, she was handcuffed and attacked. Pickton stabbed her multiple times, but in a moment of desperation and adrenaline, the woman managed to grab a weapon and injure him in return. Both of them ended up at the same hospital, she in critical condition, he in the emergency room. Hospital staff called the police, who recovered a key from the woman's pocket that unlocked the handcuffs still on her wrist, and they matched the cuffs found in Pickton's trailer. He was arrested and charged with attempted murder, assault with a weapon, and forcible confinement. However, despite the severity of the charges and the victim's statement, the case fell apart. The woman, who battled drug addiction, was deemed an unreliable witness. Pickton claimed the encounter was consensual and chaotic, and the charges were stayed in 1998. Worse, some of the evidence collected was destroyed after the case was dropped. This failure was catastrophic. Had the charges held, Robert Pickton could have been stopped 5 years before his actual arrest. Instead, he continued to kill, with increasing frequency, and the bodies of his victims were never found. Chapter 5. The 2002 Arrest and the Farm of Horrors. On February 5, 2002, police executed a search warrant on the Pickton farm related to illegal firearms. What they found, however, quickly escalated the investigation into something far darker. While seizing the weapons, officers stumbled upon items belonging to several missing women. These included personal belongings, ID cards, clothing, and bloodstains. A second, broader search warrant was obtained, allowing forensic teams to scour the entire property. What followed was one of the most extensive crime scene investigations in Canadian history. Over the next 2 years, specialists sifted through soil, walls, outbuildings, and debris. They used DNA analysis, ground-penetrating radar, and heavy excavation equipment to search for remains. The discoveries were horrifying. Partial remains of numerous women were found, some buried, others stored in buckets or coolers. Pickton had dismembered and disposed of bodies using farm equipment and, in some cases, had allegedly fed the remains to pigs. It was also later revealed that some meat processed at the farm may have been contaminated with human remains and distributed locally, though this was never officially confirmed. Eventually, enough evidence was collected to charge Pickton with the murders of 27 women. though investigators believed he may have killed over 49. In one taped conversation with an undercover officer, Pickton said, "I was going to do one more, make it an even 50. Chapter 6, The Trial and Its Shortcomings, Robert." Pickton's trial began in January 2007 in New Westminster. The Crown elected to proceed with charges related to just 6 women to streamline the process and ensure a focused prosecution. The decision was controversial, but the evidence was overwhelming. The prosecution presented DNA results, forensic evidence, and testimony from people who had known Pickton or visited the farm. Witnesses described his disturbing behavior and his references to killing women. One of the most damning pieces of evidence was the confession Pickton made to an undercover officer posing as a cellmate, where he described the murders and expressed frustration that he was caught before reaching his goal of 50 victims. On December 9, 2007, Pickton was convicted of 6 counts of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for 25 years, the maximum sentence under Canadian law at the time. Although he faced an additional 20 charges, the Crown opted not to proceed with further trials, citing the emotional toll on families and the fact that he was already serving the maximum sentence. For many, justice remained incomplete. Families of the other victims felt robbed of their day in court. The public demanded answers, and the case triggered national outrage over how law enforcement had handled both disappearances for years. Chapter 7, Aftermath and the Shadow It Left Behind. In the wake of the trial, Canada was forced to confront the societal failures that allowed Robert Pickton to continue his crimes for so long. A public inquiry, known as the Missing Women Commission of Inquiry, was launched in 2010. Its final report, issued in 2012, condemned both the Vancouver Police Department and the RCMP for systemic neglect, bias, and poor coordination. It concluded that police failed to recognize the pattern of disappearances and ignored the concerns of marginalized communities. The report made dozens of recommendations, including the need for better resources for missing persons investigations, the creation of community liaison programs, and increased support for vulnerable women. Some reforms were implemented, but critics argue that many of the core problems, especially around the treatment of Indigenous women, still persist. The Pickton farm was eventually destroyed. The land was deemed too contaminated and too traumatic to be salvaged. Memorials have since been erected across Vancouver, especially in the downtown east side. To honor the victims and ensure their lives are not forgotten, Robert Pickton remains imprisoned. As of today, he has never expressed remorse. He has filed appeals, all of which have been denied. But the story of Robert Pickton is not just about a killer. It's about the invisible, the women discarded by a society that failed to protect them, the institutions that ignored cries for help, and a justice system that came far too late. That's all for tonight's story. Another thread in the web of true crime, quietly unraveling as the night goes on. If you're still with me, thanks for listening. And if sleep has already taken you, may your dreams be peaceful and your mind at ease. I'll be here next time by the fire with another story waiting to be told. Good night, and don't forget to lock your doors.